Welcome to Inherently Distinctive.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an all-new episode of Inherently Distinctive with attorney Mark Goodman. I'm your host, Mike Leon. Mark here's a Nevada-based intellectual property attorney. He's been helping clients, startups, creatives, small business owners protect what they've built through smart trademark and patent strategy. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to keep your brand safe in the digital world. You got usernames and logos, copycats, impersonators. Mark's going to explain how you keep your stuff protected from all of that. So, Mark, it's good to see you. What's the most common way here that small business owners accidentally put their brand at risk online?
So, I think it's not so much that you can accidentally put your brand at risk online, but I do think that the online world is just kind of like this Wild West area that you just have to figure out how to tame properly, right? So, for example, issues that we see a lot is involving this. One thing that's a common misconception is people will focus very heavily on certain domain names, right? So if I'm selling widgets, right, I've got widgets.com, right? So then I own it, right? Well, owning the domain name widgets.com is not the same thing as owning a trademark to widgets, okay? And a trademark can trump ownership of a domain name. So for example, let's say I go get the trademark to the name widget, right? And then someone else grabs widget.com with GoDaddy or one of these other providers of domain names, for instance. Well, there's a process, and it'll take some time and some process to go where I can go through and take that domain name from this individual, right, or company, because I own this trademark and it would cause confusion if someone else had that widgets.com, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people assume that this really is just, okay, let me grab this, and they start grabbing all these domain names. I'm like, let's stop. Let's get a trademark to cover your brand, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's okay to get a few of these domain names. They are cheap, right? It doesn't cost very much money to get a domain name. So I don't think it's wrong to do it, but I don't, from what I understand in the search engine world, it's much less important than it used to be. Pretty much every other week or so, I get an unsolicited email from somebody saying, for example, I could get the domain name of bestpatentlawyerintheuniverse.com. All you have to do is send me $800 and it's yours, right? And in talking to the experts in this area that I trust, basically they say, just ignore that stuff, right? It's totally worthless, because nowadays Google and Bing and the other search engines, they're smart. They know what real content is. So it's much less important to just have, patentlawyerhero.com than it is to actually have great content like this amazing podcast that helps the search engines realize that your site is very, very relevant. If they're searching for, material in your area, that's what you do. And besides, most of the time now, you don't really type in, I would say most of us now, we don't type in the actual URL, right? We type into the search bar, which goes to usually Google or whatever search engine we're defaulting to. And then we type what we want, and then it brings us to the site we want. In the early days of the internet, and I'm old enough to remember when the internet started, right? And some of the kids nowadays, like, they're born into it. But for us, we know, right? It used to be very important. It's like, okay, you would advertise in other areas. I want to, go to xnx.com, right? Widget.com to get this. Whereas now you can just search up what you want and you're going to find it.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed. And, I want to stay on that for a second. And I want you to explain for sure, how do you explain the difference between trademark protection and platform control? Because I'm assuming many entrepreneurs, they assume, like you said, a trademark automatically keeps others from using their name on social media, and there's so many other domain names. How do you explain the difference to folks?
So, okay, trademark is a legal protection, right? That just gives you, and every legal protection ultimately comes down to what legal remedies could you use if you had to, right? ideally you don't have to. But for instance, if, like I was saying before, there's this process where and it's a kind of a private process through the domain name registry systems, where if you have a federally registered trademark, you can kick somebody off of the domains that are infringing that. But if that doesn't work out, ultimately you could file a lawsuit and have the court system kick them off, right? Now, one of the things that you don't want to have to do that, of course, right? So that's why it might make sense to get the domain names that you really want, lock those up as well. Now, I would say one of the things I've run into recently, this is very interesting actually. Have a new client very recently where has this website where it's she selling these products online, right? And there is a complete and utter imposter out there that has basically copied everything off of the website, put it on this other website that's similar, and looks to be selling the same types of products. And not only is it just like I can understand, okay, a same or similar name or something like that, where you can argue about infringement. This is not. This is flat out stealing, right? But we don't know where this other entity is from, where they're located. And so we're working on this challenge right now. One of the things we can do is a DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown process, right? So that's what we're working on right now with this case. And it's interesting because I think this type of scam is this other entity, I believe, is not even really selling products. What I think they're doing is they're just pretending to sell products, taking money, and not delivering the products. Because my client, I think, even attempted to buy a product, and the product like never came from this website. Like it's a pure scam. And it's interesting because I ran into something in my personal life similar to this, right? There was so I found out about this product out there, right? And my wife made me try to get this if possible. It's a laundry folding robot, right? This would be great. You know, a machine, you can throw your laundry in, it's going to fold it. Oh my God, if we can get that, I would pay any amount of money for that, right?
Me too.
At the time we would save. So there's a company that came out with this, right? But apparently the company has gone out of business or something. And I think it's probably because their system maybe just didn't work that well, something like that. It was, but there were people online purporting to sell this machine. So I thought, well, if I can get them, I'll at least try it, right? Maybe it's not going to be the greatest thing, right? Because sometimes businesses fail not because the product's not good, but because of other reasons. So who knows? Maybe this could be a good product. I want to at least try it. So I went on to Alibaba, which is the kind of the Chinese version of Amazon, right? And they had this product on there, and I was okay. I'm going to buy it, and it was like $1,200. Right? So I went and bought the thing, and then months went by. Where's the machine? Is it going to come? And I emailed the company. It was good. I still don't have this, right? And then at a certain point, I'm like, well, you guys haven't delivered this. So I did a dispute with, I think it was PayPal or whatever payment processing I used, right? And I was able to get the money refunded. And there was like no communication from this entity. And I started to think about, well, what the heck is going on here? And what I think is going on is this entity is just quote unquote selling this product, figuring they can collect money, and most people will or at least maybe not most people, but a certain fraction of folks will just forget about it. And they can just pocket this money and never deliver anything. And they probably never were even intending to sell a product to me. And the product doesn't probably even exist, right? And so that's what I think is happening with my new client's business here. This copycat company is just trying to get people to put payments in and then forget about it and not do this. Now, to Alibaba's credit and PayPal's credit, they refunded me fully, right? But I had to fill out an online form or whatever and ask for that. And even if only 5% of people don't do that, that's easy money for the scammers. Right. So anyway, that's...
No, but Mark, it funnels into a few follow-ups. So let me ask you back into the example of like working with clients, they don't understand or they don't see the dangers of what they share content wise publicly, whether it be photos, logos, videos. How do you walk clients through this, or and how they should respond when they find like an account is misusing their name or their logo online?
Okay, you're talking about somebody else outside of their
Right.
company was using it, right?
Correct.
So here are the different steps you can take, right? So again, assuming you've got the trademark, one thing you can do, send a cease and desist letter, right? And hopefully, if the company is at least legitimate or semi-legitimate, they get the cease and desist, and then maybe abide by it. And a good percentage of the time, that's all that's necessary, right? As I mentioned before, there are also these intellectual property takedown systems, and each platform has its own kind of takedown regime, right? So, for instance, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you're using, X, right? All of these social media platforms, each one has its own, like, almost private law that you can use to kick things out. And the thing is that you usually do want to use these things because it's much less expensive to do that than it would be to take something into the court system. But ultimately, everything is subject to the court system. So if you're not getting what you want there, what you could do is file a lawsuit, federal district court, and hopefully get a judgment. A lot of times it could be a default, right? Because these companies are usually not, in these type of situations, aren't going to fight and defend this lawsuit. You can get a default judgment, then take that judgment to the platforms, and in pretty much all cases, they will do the takedown if you have a court order or judgment on it.
But before we get back into the companies, let me shift to creators and influencers. So for those that are building a personal brand, what extra steps do you advise them on in terms of helping to prove their ownership and stop these impersonators early?
I think it's probably a good practice to have some good records on when you launched your product or service. Now, sometimes the platforms will keep that for you, right? Like, when was your first YouTube video on this, or your first posting? But it might be good to have a nice file with that, because if there's a dispute, um, one of the most important factors is who was using this mark first in commerce. And so, at least to have that established, and of course have the federal trademark registration done and filed, going to be important. I think also, it's good to social media influencers. One of the things that issues that comes up a lot for us is to understand exactly what your brand is, right? Because, is it your name? Is it the name of some sort of channel, right? Or is it are we selling some other thing, some other product or service, or is it maybe all of those things, or some of those things? So it's just good to have that conversation with your intellectual property attorney, and just lock that's all of those items down as much as you can at the outset.
Yeah. I want to shift back to the businesses now. What are some smart habits or small business systems that make it easier to monitor online use of a brand before these problems start to really snowball?
There is there are services that you can work, companies that basically specialize in doing this, actually, right? So if you're in a now, for I wouldn't necessarily advise this for every business, but depending on your type of business, it's at least something to flag and consider, I would say. Is For instance, and these have different forms. There's trademark monitoring services, which we use, where basically they're historically they would have people just trolling around the internet looking for potentially infringing companies or applications and that kind of thing. And nowadays, I think a lot of that is done through artificial intelligence, and sometimes maybe some human work and artificial intelligence together, right? And it's important because you actually, in the trademark field, you have to police your brand. When I, if you just don't enforce your mark at all, you actually risk losing your rights. And this seems like kind of scary to people, but it's the law in here makes sense, because just imagine this, right? Let's say you and I open up a coffee shop and call it Starbucks. I use this example a lot, right? Well, of course, what's going to happen is we're going to get sued by the Starbucks company. But let's say they didn't. Let's say they just said, oh, we don't have to deal with all of this stuff. We're not going to sue anybody. No cease and desist, just whatever. We don't care, right? Well, at a certain point, that erodes their brand, because the whole idea behind trademark law is we want to prevent consumer confusion in the marketplace, right? Because if we open up a phony baloney Starbucks, people would show up at our place thinking that they're going to an establishment that's associated with a Starbucks brand they love, but it's not. And everything would be different, and they would be confused as to what's going on. But if enough time goes by and nobody's enforcing this, well, then then that brand doesn't have any meaning to consumers anymore. So then you don't have any trademark rights. And as well, there's a principle called latches, where if you just wait too long, right, then it also becomes unfair to enforce it, because now this new company has invested a lot of capital and built its own customer base based on this type of brand. So it would be unfair for you to later come back and kick them out. So you really have to get on this stuff early, and it's and that's why almost every large company has these trademark monitoring services in place. So they find things. It's amazing how well this works. I have clients that come in like, how did they even know about me? Well, they're looking for you, right? If your brand is too similar to somebody that's famous and big, you're going to be getting a letter.
Yep, you're going to be getting a letter. Mark, so as we wrap here, a business owner is listening to this right now. They just heard your words and they're like, I think I've waited too long to protect my brand. Is it ever too late to get control back? What would a piece of advice you would give to them?
So good news is for in the trademark field, and this is I want to contrast with patenting, right? If you have an invention, if you start selling the product in the marketplace, you have exactly 1 year in which to file a patent application covering that technology, or else you forever lose your right to do so. That is a huge bomb out there in the intellectual property law that you need to understand, right? It's different in trademark, right? I had a client a couple of years ago that had been in business 20 years with a certain mark, and just for whatever reason that didn't get the trademark, and we went ahead and got the trademark. So you can do it later. You're in a much better position when you do it earlier, but it really is never too late on the trademark side. On the patent side, understand that it can be too late. So you absolutely need to think about this stuff early.
Yeah. Mark, thanks for the time and insights as always on this. Truly appreciate it.
Okay, no problem.
And thank you to everybody out there listening to today's installment of Inherently Distinctive with attorney Mark Goodman. Listen, if you want to learn more about protecting your ideas, inventions, brands, do me a favor, visit goodmanlawnevada.com today. Thank you to everybody for listening to this episode. But don't forget, like, subscribe, leave a review, comment, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.